An organization has been helping poor countries for 80 years. During this time, the countries it assisted have only grown poorer. Coincidence? Let's investigate. This organization is the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, headquartered in Washington. The United States is its largest shareholder and has the primary voice. Its board of directors comprises representatives from the very governments that lobby for the interests of Cargill, Monsanto, Goldman Sachs, and hundreds of other corporations eager to enter new markets. The IMF is not a charity. It's a tool and a pure scam. I'll now show you exactly how it operates, but let's first consider an example. 30 years ago, Haiti was self-sufficient, growing its own rice and sustaining a peasant economy. Then, the IMF arrived with money and conditions. Eliminate import tariffs. Open your market. Let us in. Haiti agreed. With an empty treasury, there was no other choice. Within just 2 years, subsidized American rice flooded the country at prices local farmers simply couldn't compete with. Fields were abandoned, and peasants left their land. A nation that once fed itself became the world's third largest buyer of American rice. This led to hunger riots and casualties. American farmers gained a new market, and the IMF reported a successful reform. This is no accident. It's a systemic scheme that has operated identically across continents for decades. Here's how the trap is set. A country faces an economic crisis, be it war, drought, or falling commodity prices. The cause doesn't matter. Reserves dwindle, and debts become unpayable. That's when the IMF appears with a stack of cash and the promise, we will help. But this assistance comes at a cost. It's not the interest rate, that's minor. The real price is a list of reforms that looks identical for Haiti, Ghana, Argentina, Ethiopia, and Pakistan. Privatize state-owned enterprises, cut spending on healthcare and education, remove tariff protections, open markets to foreign companies, and keep the currency weak to make exports cheaper, meaning your resources are bought by foreigners for pennies. Why are these measures necessary? The official answer is to create a free market and attract investment. The real answer is to allow multinational corporations to enter a market that has just had all its protective barriers removed, acquire assets at fire sale prices during privatization, and begin extracting wealth from the local population without any competition from local businesses, which by then have been eliminated. Consider the figures from Africa. Ghana, under the demands of structural adjustment programs, slashed rice tariffs from 100% to 20%. Imports immediately nearly doubled. The share of local farmers in their own market plummeted from 43% to 29% in 3 years. In Senegal, cheap European chicken, subsidized by European governments, mind you, wiped out 70% of the local poultry industry. People who once fed their families and neighbors lost their jobs and land, while European agribusinesses gained a new market. Today, 3 out of 4 developing countries are net. Food importers. They depend on the global market, that is, on the very corporations that control it. A separate issue is what happens to money within the country after the IMF arrives. Privatization is a euphemism for a very simple process. State-owned enterprises, built with taxpayer money, are sold to foreign investors at a moment when the country is most vulnerable and willing to accept any price. Water utilities, power grids, telecommunications, ports, all fall into private hands. Subsequently, tariffs and prices rise because the new owner's goal isn't to provide affordable services to the population, but to extract profit. The same applies to cuts in healthcare and education spending. In a country where the government stops paying doctors and teachers, these sectors quickly become fee-based, meaning they are accessible only to those who can afford them. The poor are left behind. Inequality and social tensions escalate, leading to conflicts. Here's a paradox the IMF never publicly explains. Countries that rejected its prescriptions have, on average, developed better than those that accepted them. China built its economy behind strict protectionist barriers and lifted 800 million people out of poverty. South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan all industrialized under the protection of state subsidies and tariffs, the very measures the IMF now forbids its clients from implementing. When today's wealthy nations were developing, they did precisely what they now prohibit poorer nations from doing. Coincidence? No. This is known as kicking away the ladder. This is precisely why more and more countries are simply refusing IMF assistance. Ethiopia, Argentina, and Bolivia, at various times, have terminated programs and forged their own paths, not because they didn't need the money, but because they calculated the true cost of that money, and it proved too high. An IMF loan is not a friendly handout. It's a mortgage with fine print that effectively states, "You hand over your economy to us." The most cynical aspect of this entire narrative is perhaps this: the IMF genuinely believes in what it does, or at least pretends to. Its staff are highly educated individuals with degrees from Harvard and the London School of Economics, speaking in the language of models, charts, and long-term forecasts. They don't appear as villains. They come across as mundane bureaucrats who simply want to help. But this is precisely where the scam lies, in the institutional packaging that makes what is essentially a robbery look like a legitimate. Consultation. Money was provided. Reforms were implemented. Barriers were removed. Corporations entered. The country became poorer. The IMF then issued a report stating that more reforms were needed. And so the cycle continues.